Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation for this lecture. And hello, everybody. I am Zuhal, and this is Carlos Zarco Sons. We are from OpenAct Architecture, which is based in Madrid and also in Istanbul. And today, as part of the ongoing exchange of Europan Forum, we will be kind of focusing on the open project, which lays the foundations of our of the research of our studio. But we will also share with you kind of our methodology through our projects and through our processes. When we look at Europan's work, we can see that it engages a medium of the speculative architectural work within the fabric of social, political, and economic reality. And the work of OpenAct, the work of Europan in that sense, it creates a series of manifestos on the environmental imagination through spatial fictions. But while doing this, Europan also engages with the public and with its authorities and kind of like calls them to relate with the complexity of the design and the complexity of designing for the Earth's systems in their vast scales and in their living nature. So formulating these speculative but well-grounded manifestos for different sites by designers, most of the times who are aliens to those sites, like us and like many of you, it generates a challenge. And so one of the potential answers to the question how to reimagine a territory, our methodology developed through the sequence of story, speculation, and system as we looked into our works kind of like retrospectively in that sense. So the first step in this sequence is the story. Because learning the story of the territory becomes the first action, and to be able to understand to be able to understand and frame its context. Because stories had been crucial for humans to navigate the world and learn and record things and places. And similarly, during the design process, researching about a territory becomes the collection of data, facts, experiences, happenings, past events. But this process is not merely a delve into history. Rather, it's the collection of series of vignettes and information that are drawn from different times and different parts of the territory that altogether they help define its context. And this is a process of, as we call it, relational reasoning. And this relational reasoning of the territorial context in this phase, it kind of works like an X-raying process. And it creatively unfolds the realities out of constraints, and it aims to see the unseen and discover the invisible. And the best way to spatialize all this contextual data, which constitutes a territory, for us, mapping had been the main tool, and maybe to quote from James Corner, mapping uncovers realities and that were previously unimagined. It unfolds the potentials and discover new grounds upon the traces of a living context. So as we can kind of sum up, maybe mapping remakes a territory over and over again. And these maps are not analysis diagrams, but they are cartographic imaginations, as we can think of it like that. They are capturing the stories between reality and speculation. And they are also not master plans. because master plans concerned with the composition and order of static parts, but they are rather a variety of territorial, political, social, and environmental processes that flow through the space.
So in a sense, these maps and these mappings that we are speaking about, they reveal the potentials to construct a new narrative. Therefore, it allows us to imagine the territory through speculation. This speculative nature of the design process actually enables each site to be envisioned through various optics, and each optic constructs a new and different narrative to that site. So mapping, again, in that sense, is a very powerful tool, political tool, to construct that speculative narrative through the territory. For example, you can see in this slide the extents, the narrative of the Imperial Federation, placing the British Empire in the center of the image, and showing the exploitative extents of the empire in other continents. Whereas, for example, in Fuller's dimension map, the narrative completely changes, and now there is no center of the picture, there is no center of the world, there is no up, there is no down, there is no north or south. And again, similarly, this is an image that we love to use in the presentations. We give the Earthrise photo of the Apollo 8, which is the first photo that is taken from a great distance. That is taken, the photo is taken to the Earth in 1968, and it suggests another narrative, a new narrative, with no visible national borders or boundaries. It depicts this intertwined fluid system flowing through each other, a living Earth that is again surrounded by complete darkness of space, and a planet that appears fragile and vulnerable.
So Earthrise showed us that our Earth inhabits system of systems where multiple levels of complexity exist, coexist, converge, and collide. It is a collection of open-ended systems, and any changes at any scale that is made to this system potentially affect the whole of the planet. Therefore, becoming aware of this open-ended nature of the Earth, 60s and 70s marked the history with emerging awareness of the environmental issues. There were radical transformations in social structures, especially in the Western world. There were technological innovations, globalization, individualism, nomadism, and so on. So the strategies of the designers from that era corresponded to this multitudinous of these drastic changes. They created projects in which the design was conducted sometimes through the processes of natural succession, for example, or aerodynamic effects of the planetary forces, or as well as sometimes the shifts of social structures. But no matter what scales they all worked in, all of the projects and proposals exhibited experiments of open-endedness and of adaptability. That was either through the malleability of a material, or sometimes it was through the flexibility of an entire urban infrastructure. And yet today, in the 21st century, we again find ourselves in an era of far-reaching transformation, and also in a century that, since the beginning, which is heavily dominated by crises one after another. From ecological to economic, from social crisis to pandemic. It's testing the resilience of the systems that we are living in. So this test of resiliency is repositioning the role of architecture, technology, and infrastructure away from static and hard systems, which are defined with which are permanent and which are crystallized. But towards a more open, and maybe in Sanford Quinter's terms, like soft systems that consist of infinite series of living and dynamic coexistences, switches, relays, like circuits, activating constantly the matter and the information. So today we will be presenting two of our awarded projects out of the four of Europan projects. And these projects, researching through design, their goal actually that we will share now is to examine and translate the open-endedness, the openness of living ecology into living experiences. So their scope in this quest ranges from the scale of sometimes material innovation to territorial networks, but they all embrace the living and temporal conception of territory within ecology. So they all allow the expression of space through a multitude of different temporalities, ranging from different speeds, seasons, cycles, movements, migrations, and mobilities.
So the first project that in this regard, that we are going to be presenting today is our Europan 16 project for Bitonto in Italy, which was the runner-up in the competition. Located in the south of Italy, these ancient territories of this region and Bitonto's municipal terrain are really vast and diverse. It's an area that expands from urban centers to rural peripheries, agricultural lands to natural reserves, from coast to the inlands. And these lands offer a diverse range of encounters with their historic roots. This is an area that brings together the human and the natural spheres all through the story of olive. Similar to other areas of the Mediterranean, olive's existence on this territory is actually the reason of countless processes that are happening around the olive's cultivation processes. Olive historically has been an emblem, a sign of peace, purity, and victory. And its growth, cultivation, and harvesting generated a myriad of rituals around this topic of olive. And this generated from common conversations to multi-scalar productive networks, which are also very legible when we are seeing a Bitonto's municipal region. And olive in this land is the common heritage, both as natural, but also as a human artifact. It connects the diverse ecosystem with culture, history, civilization, and architecture. This dominant character of olive in the region offers a specific potential, and it opens up new possibilities for Bitonto to reestablish and re-question the connections in between the urban, the rural, the center, the hamlets, the past, the present, the human nature, machinic and organic, and all this through the processes and stories of olive.
So in this regard, our project proposal was inspired by the production cycles of olive, and we proposed a process-driven design approach and a new form of connectedness through a framework that was revolving around the cyclical rituals of olive farming, olive harvesting. And this was to be able to enable dynamic coexistence of sociocultural, socioeconomic, and ecological mutations. And so an olive tree's calendar, as you can see here on the screen, generated the foundations of this uniting framework. And here you can see each one of them: the inflorescence, flowering, fruiting, ripening, harvest, rejuvenation, pruning, and dormancy. So each process of the olive cycle, both literally but also metaphorically, suggested events, activities, and implementations, as we were calling them, rituals in the project, that originate from the particular moments in the cultivation cycle. So, for example, the moment of pollination, it is the flowering time of the tree, but it's also the seasonal events for the pollination of the ideas. Or, for example, the time of the harvest, it was not only an occasion where it was the time for collecting the produce, but it was also a period when public crowdsourcing or voting results were collected. Or, for example, the rejuvenation and the dormancy period, it is a time of repair for the olive tree. But it was also a term to collaborate in the ecosystem restoration of the natural reserves by people. So like this, all layers of connectivity and all the rituals are harmonized with each other through the processes of olives cultivation. And as you can see in here, the institutions with the individuals, the ecology with the public, all of them came together within this multi-layered framework. And the layers of the connection, in that sense, became the trails of rituals, and the 3 squares of Bitonto, they became the stations of these rituals. This was a system that, to be able to design for the 3 different squares, it looked at what happens in between them and what connects them, and what are the roles of each one of them within this 21st century infrastructure.
And because connectedness means much more than physical links in this century, our project supported this proposed framework with a communicative virtual ecosystem. This digital tool somehow offered an information system to provide active ecological monitoring, self-organization tools for people, urban mobility, and many more similar activities that can be achieved with these digital tools. So by using this digital system, actually, our project aimed to upscale the connectivity of Bitonto and its hamlets from a local perspective and scale to a global scale. Inspired from the historic Roman trails of Bitonto, like Via Cella and Via Traiana, and the ecological trails also of the area, like Lama Ballice, the project introduced 5 layers of connectivity, layers to restore the broken relationship between the town and its centers. So each layer of these trails actually illustrates a vision for the region to create an eco-political project that actually reinterprets the connotations of a productive landscape. It aims to become not only a project of passive preservation and renaturalization of the area, but a project of characterization and symbiotic activation of the programs. All these trails, as connectivity layers, actually strengthen the existing ties existing in the local area and create new channels to form new relationship throughout the changing seasons and also revolving on the olive calendar.
And the 3 squares of the towns became the stations, as we said before, of these trails. So each one offering different potentials with their specific offerings. They were renovated with soft urbanism tactics such as blue and green infrastructure, self-sufficient energy solutions, or collaborative labs, or traffic evaporation strategies to be able to manifest the motions of all the all year long happenings in the town centers. And like that, these squares became landscapes of social instruments to create different events and experiences with the active collaboration of its public at all scales, at all times. And so all of these strategies of rituals and stations in different scales and different layers collectively created this atlas of rituals for Bitonto and its hamlets. And it was to promote its unique urbanity, not only locally and regionally, but also potentially globally, as a case study maybe, to study where natural ecosystems and nature-based public activities are incorporated together.
And the second and last project we're going to be presenting today is another Europan project, in this case Europan 13, under the topic of adaptable city cycle. And in this case, the brief was focusing on the forgotten public spaces around the river banks of the River Sava. The River Sava is the wildest and the strongest branch of the River Danube, and is passing through 5 different countries. And it is so wild that the city of Zagreb has a really particular relationship with it. Unlike some other European capitals, there are reasons and they are created and established around the river. Zagreb's urban growth has been formed with a tendency to move away from the river, trying to avoid the constant floods and trajectory changes that the river was having. And as the wildest branch of the River Danube, Sava historically had harmed and distracted the city of Zagreb. And it's not until the 70s, with the technology of the embankment and the dike construction around it, that the city actually is able to control and tame and channel the waters of Sava. And since then, Zagreb has expanded its territory towards south, leaving the river in the middle of the urban scape. Aiming to test the potential of the river banks as vital spaces, the brief asked for proposals that actually can shift this perception of the area after the memories of the floods. And as you can see in this slide, the project area is a vast 7 kilometers length, running from east to west of the city of Zagreb, cutting it in half and pretty much acting like a huge void in the middle of Zagreb. And the main question for us was how to transform this 7 kilometers flat terrain into enduring public space, but with temporary programming. Later, as we were commissioned and we started working with the city of Zagreb, the project site kind of shifted, and it moved in between the 3 main bridges that cross Sava from south to north. Zagreb has this very symmetrical planning, and the idea was that this would be a riverbank park that is temporary, but is also shifting and changing, adapting and evolving with the citizens over the course of the years. Due to the increase of the water levels, which occurred several times in 1 year, no permanent structure was allowed to be placed in the floodplains in the riverbanks of Sava. So to be able to cope with the natural flows and the programmatic changes required by the citizens, but also the phase implementation stages that based on financial resources of the city, the project defined a set of strategies in different scales. The basic modules, as we call them in the competition phase, the activators, were 9 pavilions designed with really basic scaffolding structures. As you can imagine, we had to meet with the emergency flood protocol of Croatian Waters. Actually, Croatian Waters is able to predict the flood 4 to 5 days before it happens. So we had a really short time span to actually mount and dismount these structures and remove them from the site in case of flood. So these different pavilions are able to host different programs within themselves, but their clustering and combination and grouping of these activators can create different combinations and create bigger scale programs, such as a floating concert, a temporary museum, or some big sports event. On the larger scale, the project proposed really soft and subtle interventions, such as biking paths connecting these and walking paths connecting these clusters, and also envision different sports activities and sports areas like beach football, beach volleyball, paragliding, and horse riding. And we also proposed some restorative plantation to filtrate the waters of Sava River when the flood was coming. And finally, within the city scale, the Excel scale, we introduced the idea that actually the pavilion clusters will be moved from one side to the other in different implementation seasons, of course, to help start an urban conversation in the city and enhance this east-west access in Zagreb. And as the pavilions are being moved from one side to the other one, the different neighborhoods will start also a conversation with each other. but not only with each other, but also with the project. That engagement and feedback mechanism will feed the project with local ideas and improvements and potential locations that will be introduced in the hopeful versions of the project in the future. And like that, the project will turn into an open-ended, adaptable process that not only adapts to the natural changes of the site, but also to the present and the future of the society.
So between 2017 and 2019, we worked on the project documentation and with the city of Zagreb. And in 2019, early summer, we were able to implement the first phase on 3 sites. So 9 pavilions were mounted on 3 different sites next to the most frequently used bridges of Zagreb, and the constructed pavilions were activated with various cultural and sports programs between the months June to October. So that year we didn't encounter any floods, which was good news for us. But also in the first step we were able to test the speed of the construction and the dismantling of the construction of the pavilions. And it was quite faster than we expected, so it was kind of relaxing. But we were also able to test the resilience and the adaptability of the structures, and according to the necessities of each user group. There was a base for each individual tenant to keep the holistic approach of the project, but later each tenant had the freedom to decorate and adapt the spaces according to their programs within their own terms and budgets. But still the project was trying to keep this openness for different scales like that. And the programs and activities of the first phase were ranging from open-air cinema and stage to beach bars and cafes and sports fields around the river. There was also a playground and kayaking. And it showed an alternative way of using Sava's river banks during that summer, which are completely abandoned. And as you see, each pavilion has a different activity, but their combination creates a much bigger program. And in the end, the project and we were trying to cope with this large amount of unknowingness and unpredictability that was surrounding the project. And within this programmatic and ecological indeterminacy, we aim to transform this area into a vibrant space for the city. And I guess overall, the project standard as an exploration of opportunities to experiment the effects of kind of relatively small and soft and temporal interventions that were characterized by dynamism and immateriality and indeterminacy on a large-scale urban scenario for Zagreb. And with that, we'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you.